What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the 2 Feet on the Ground Gravity Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Chris. Thank you for choosing to tune in today. Hey, folks, we're keeping this conversation going. How do we stay grounded in a world full of noise and chaos? And Jaimie and my goal is to bring different guests on the show that have some perspective in life. They're going to drop some on you. You may agree with them. You may disagree with them. That's not the point. The point is carving out the time to listen to others' perspective so that you can identify your foundations in life and stay grounded. That's the hope. Hey, folks, today's guest, Travis Gribble, is a retired police officer out of Arizona and just has a powerful story of experiencing trauma on the job as a police officer. And we're not talking about, at least the stuff that really finally tipped the scales, wasn't even anything like a direct trauma on him. It was him seeing bad stuff happening to kids, which is something that I can relate with. You're going to get something from this story. I was super appreciative of Travis for agreeing to come on the podcast. But before we get into that, folks, you know what I want to talk about. I want to talk about service peace warriors. I keep bringing them up because I see them doing positive things in the lives of veterans and first responders. So you've heard me talk about this before. They're a nonprofit. They raise the money. They train up service animals. They train up the veteran. They equip the veteran with the service animal for 100% free. It doesn't cost the veteran anything. And for someone that's struggling with a post-traumatic stress injury, having a service animal along with other modalities of treatment can be life-giving, can be absolutely 100% life-giving, and that's why I love what Service Peace Warriors is doing. So if you haven't checked them out, please do so today, servicepeacewarriors.org. With that, folks, let's get into this interview with Travis. Travis Gribble, welcome to the Gravity Podcast.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate the opportunity. It's my pleasure.
Now, you're getting some air miles in right now, aren't you? I mean, you are traveling all around the country.
I am since January of this year, things have really blown up and I've been all over the place. This next week's going to be crazy. I'm in Missoula for a couple days here in Montana, then jump on a red eye for 2 days in New York in front of a bunch of SWAT guys and other first responders. So looking forward to it. It gets tiring at times, but after that, and then one more trip back into Washington to Spokane to be with the SWAT team there to talk to them about some stuff. And then I've got a good, like about 6-week break, which I'm looking forward to.
That's good. You deserve it, brother. I really
Thanks.
appreciate the work you're doing. Hey, if you don't mind, for the listeners that don't know who you are, can you just share kind of that 2-minute version of who is Travis?
Absolutely. So Travis Gribble, I live in Montana now, but I retired out of Mesa, Arizona, Mesa PD, and had done 24 years in law enforcement. About half of that it was in Michigan until I chose to lateral, looking for a really big city. Ended up in Mesa, which is right outside of Phoenix, 520,000 people, 850, 900 officers. So pretty active department, busy agency. And yeah, I went through some struggles with just post traumatic stress and dealing with the everyday calls and some pretty significant ones. Ultimately, seeking a early retirement, which I received, and then was kind of thrust into by chance, sharing my story, and now it's blown up into this organization that, like I said, in Montana and traveling all over the country, having an opportunity to speak to other first responders.
As you give these talks, and I want to get into the story here in a second, but as you give these talks, what kind of response do you hear from military and first responder folks?
Yeah, man, kind of overwhelming to be honest with you, because I still to this day, I don't do anything in my book really special. It's just that I'm willing to share my story. And I guess the relevancy of, I have some credibility in the profession. So people hearing that I've, done some things, but I'm willing to say that, yeah, I struggled. And then I guess it's been described to me by a few people actually saying that I kind of gave them permission to say, hey, it's okay to not be okay. And then, yeah, come forward. It kind of gave them that, I guess, little boost. And I deal that I even get that through social media or my, email. People kind of want that extra little shove to say, yeah, man, you're on the right track. Go get some help. And I guess that's, it's pretty simple. It seems simple. But yeah, it's working.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a simple concept. Just you being willing to have the courage to share your story is simple. There's nothing magic, right? There's no new technology. This is just talking. But we weren't doing this. I'm a third generation cop. My grandpa, my dad, they weren't talking about this stuff.
Right.
At least
Yeah.
not like this.
Yeah. That's how I came up. I mean, you've heard my story that, 24 years ago, started in 1996. I guess it's 26 years ago. Yeah, man, it was just pretty much, hey, shift was hard, go out, grab a beer, whatever, but get back tomorrow and get right back after it. And it just was not, it wasn't talked about, wasn't accepted to say, hey, man, that call, hit me pretty hard. I don't know what's wrong with me or what's going on. Why am I not sleeping? We just kept it quiet, and came back to work the next day and kept, trying to push through.
Yeah, I remember the first time my mom, when dad wasn't home right after work, and I was like, hey, where's dad? She's like, he's at choir practice. And I was like,
Yep.
I didn't know dad knew how to sing. That's pretty cool.
I know, man. Yeah, it's funny. And some of the new people coming in, you mentioned choir practice, you're like, what is choir practice? Why are we doing that? But yeah, it's definitely from our generation and his, that was a known term.
So you started in the 90s, you said up in Minnesota?
Michigan. Yep.
Michigan. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And so what was that experience like policing in Michigan?
Yeah, man. I worked for a pretty rural county. So I think when I left, we had 15, 16 officers or deputies on the road. We also ran a jail. But rural community, a lot of farming, some small towns and villages throughout. Police work is police work pretty much everywhere you go. It's just the volume, right? I guess. But yeah, we dealt with our occasional violent crime, lots of domestics, lots of child cases, low income type issues that affect families, alcohol, drugs. Meth was big when I started there, where they were like, back when they were stealing the anhydrous, I guess whatever that was called, the chemical the farmers were using to make their own, have the meth labs and all that. So that was big. So yeah, just probably what a lot of people experience in law enforcement, but it was small, not a ton of opportunities for different positions, I guess.
So when you looked for the move to down to Mesa,
Mm-hmm.
was there a point, like I remember going through my own issues in, like I felt the cup getting fuller, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before it overflowed and I actually needed to raise my hand and get help. I sensed that the stress was a little bit more. Were you there up in Michigan, or were you just still hair on fire? I can't believe I get to be a cop and they pay me for this.
Obviously hindsight's 2020. Back then I thought, I'm cruising right along, but now looking back, because I was involved in a shooting back there, had some pretty significant suicides, child deaths, that those calls never left me. And knowing what I know now and knowing how you should be dealing with this, yes, my cup was getting full, that I should have been seeking help on numerous, incidents that I was involved in. But again, man, it was not the only time I had any therapist interaction was from my officer involved shooting, to where you go there and you do this stupid little checkbox of, get 3 days off, go get cleared to come back to duty, saying that, yep, I'm good to go. I'm not drinking too much. I'm okay with what I did and I'm ready to go back to work. That was my only interaction. So
Makes me think of when I returned from Iraq. They're like, hey, here's a questionnaire. If you check these answers wrong, you don't see your family for more time. So you better
yeah,
check this way if you want to go home.
man, I hear that from a ton of veterans. And yeah, you just connected that dot with me, that is exactly the same. Because people have asked me, they're like, hey, when you get in an officer involved shooting, do people coach you on what to say? I honestly don't remember being coached, but somewhere along the line, I had already learned that, like, hey, I can't tell them that this is affecting me. I can't tell them that I'm not getting sleep. I can't tell them that, yeah, I've drank a little bit much this last week, because that would be, oh, maybe a red flag and they wouldn't send me back, right? It's not in a manual anywhere, but somewhere in our culture, the people you're around, they let you know that, hey, this is how you get back to work,
Yeah. What other layers are there? Like for me, I've really been chewing. I think I just mentioned this to you before we hit record, but just shame. And shame's an interesting emotion for me because I don't recognize it as shame, right? It comes out, for at least in me, it comes out in anger, or it manifests itself in other ways. But
Mm-hmm.
there's a certain amount of, I mean, as a police officer, I got into this job because I want to solve problems, right? I want to go into the gunfire. I want to be the solution to these things so that bad people don't do things to people that are innocent. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like that's been a layer at all for you through this concept of shame?
Shame was really big when I finally hit rock bottom in 2021 because, I'd been, the poster child of thinking you're Mr. Big, tough SWAT guy, that this is never going to affect you and this is just what you signed up for. And so me coming forward, I completely felt like a failure for, a little bit. I had a therapist that understood that was going to be a major issue for me. And so she, she molded my therapy around some of those issues to address that. And then, some of it, man, like about, I don't know how you felt, but throughout my career, I've never been good about asking people for help. I always feel like, hey, everyone's got their own shit. And then obviously what we do, we're out there protecting the public. I'm taking on their burdens. So for me to say, hey, can you help me? I was never comfortable with that, which is, again, I think that's part of our culture, unfortunately, that because many people that I talk to that have kind of went through a rough time, they all say that even with their loved ones, their family, they don't want to burden them. They don't want to be the problem. That I guess we almost associate ourselves with the people we're dealing with in the public. That, I don't want to be that person. They're calling us for help. I don't want to have to call anyone for help. So which is unfortunate, but changing the conversation, I think, can help that.
I've seen that with other professions as well. I remember responding out to a house one time, a gal who was having a medical emergency, and I had some connections. Like, we knew each other through other people. And this woman was a nurse. And now I'm medically taking care of her until the ambulance gets there. And she was, I remember her expressing a similar emotion to me of, this isn't right. You're not supposed to be taking care of me. I'm the nurse.
Yeah.
Totally get it, right? And I've been there where I'm like, nope, right now I get to take care of you. Right now you just get to be a patient. And I've said that message. I say that to other people.
Mm-hmm.
But I too struggled with being able to get help.
Yeah, I can see that. My mother-in-law, she just retired a couple years ago, been a doctor, and I can see that in her. Like, yeah, like I'm supposed to help people, has a hard time asking other people for help. So I can see that when, you're doing this 40 plus hours a week of solving everyone else's problems. Who are you supposed to turn to, or you just don't feel like it's the right thing to do, which is not that we have to change that, obviously.
Yeah. Recently, I heard a different podcast host, Tom and Jen Satterley. They do the All Secure Foundation, All Secure podcast. He was Delta Force on the ground in Mogadishu, just a squared away dude and gal. I mean, I really respect them. And what he said is, we need to change that narrative. Let's stop calling it help. Let's tell our folks that we need to train them. This isn't right. I mean, yes, help is a piece of it, but we need to train you on how to care for your brain. And just like I need help clearing a room, I'm not going to go into a room by myself, right? I call for a second.
Right.
And then we go deal with that problem together. We don't think of that as help, though. That's just our training. That's just the protocol of safe operations. But we don't apply that equally to this whole mental health conversation.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the angles I use when I get in front of executive level staff members. That, hey, you send all your people to all these different trainings. Obviously, you have so many required hours to get through the academy, in service training once your career starts, and your specialty unit. But yet we're not doing much for this up here for our people. How can you say that's any different? Like, we want this to be as sharp as possible throughout that 20 plus year career. So we have to train it. And that's, again, man, that's our culture. Like, we never never thought about that, I guess, and just kind of pushed it aside. But I will do all I can to, just continue to help change that narrative.
Well, and as long as you keep speaking, you're helping change it. That's the thing, is we need to keep the conversation going. Hey, brother, we've hit around this a few times. If you don't mind getting into your story. So you leave Michigan, you head down to Mesa, you eventually are on the full-time SWAT team. If you don't mind starting there, somewhere in there, and just kind of moving forward to you realizing, hey, I need to raise my hand.
Yeah, man. So shortly after, about a year and a half after I lateraled, I tested for the SWAT team and was fortunate to make it. And then a few months after that, again, another huge blessing. Our team went full time, so I had just an awesome opportunity and a lot of fun. Our team went full time. That's all we did. SWAT operations, and then we'd help out patrol with high risk incidents, things like that. So stayed on that for about 6 years. It was running and gunning. We were doing about 300 operations a year, and so very busy. Not only, we had the PD culture of saying at Mesa, hey, don't come forward for help. If you do, your career is never going to be the same. You're going to get penalized. Well, even within the team, unfortunately, and by me coming forward, we've changed some of that culture, and I can share that. But our team was terrible about, criticizing people that were having difficulties, whether they had been in a shooting, whether they had been to some rough calls. And we just, we're notorious for honestly just talking shit, which I'm super regretful about. But it was thick, amongst us. And so did that. And then, I guess it was about 6 years into it, our team saw that a team leader position, a couple of them might be coming open. So they wanted some of us to test for sergeant. So I did that. I was one of the ones that volunteered for that. And it's a risk because you have to go back to the street for at least a year, and there's no guarantee that you're going to get back to the team. So, but I did it and tested pretty well. And the first group of people off the list that I was on end up getting, pulled to the street to go through what it was called the STEP program, which is kind of like an FTO process for police officers, but it's for a sergeant. You get put with a senior sergeant. They take you through some, training for weeks and weeks until they sign off on you and say, yep, you're good to go to have your own squad. So, and then actually, my very first day on the job as a patrol sergeant trainee, the very first call out of the gate at about 7 a.m. We had started at 6 in the morning. Get called to it was a life-changing call. We get called to some information given to us that a male individual had went to another male's apartment to meet this individual for sex. They had met on like an online chat thing. And after they had got done with what they were doing, the person in the apartment said, hey, I have a little girl that if you would like to, be with her, you can do that as well. And this guy was like, hey, I'm not into that. And he left. Ultimately ended up, thankfully, this guy called. He at first, he would not give his location. He gave the location of his apartment, but wouldn't say where he was or give his name. Heads up, patrol officer ends up seeing this guy in the area, makes a stop, turns out to be him. So we get more detailed information at this point, and ultimately I take over as the scene supervisor, and we go there, and I take up a team of officers to knock on the apartment, and probably thinking that we're going to do an exigent circumstance search warrant exception to go in and check for the welfare of this little girl. So a couple officers went in ahead of me, and off to the right, I see a closet door that's closed. I hold on that while they finish clearing the rest of the apartment. They don't find anything. And then when they get done, they say, hey, boss, we're all set. I say, hey, I got this this closet door. I'm going to check on my own. They'll be behind me, but there's no room for multiple people. And open the door, clear it first, obviously firearms out. Nothing stands out immediately. It's just, full of a bunch of junk. But I look down a couple feet in front of me, and for some reason, a black trash bag stands out to me. And I holster and I go to reach for the bag. And as I do, a little girl's head pops up, and she's alive, but her mouth is duct taped, and just an overwhelming smell. She's sitting in her feces and urine. And get her up out of the bag, and her hands are bound with gray duct tape, and so her ankles. So she's conscious, but no reaction, no emotion or anything. We obviously moved to get the tape removed and get her medical help. And yeah, man, it was a soul shocking call. The other sergeant was with me. He had to check out. He couldn't continue. So I took the call on my own. And that's no dig on him. That a lot of people had a very difficult time that day. And somehow I sucked it up. And yeah, just a lot of aftermath and stuff. But I never, for many, many years, I never dealt with it because afraid of I wouldn't get promoted, afraid I wouldn't make it back to the team because that was our culture. And not that anyone ever told you that, but it was you saw it within the agency that like, hey, someone comes forward for help, they're like considered, oh, they can't handle stress. They get put in some stupid position in a closet somewhere. And it was just time after time of seeing that. And there's just what is our culture again. So
Yeah, it
I don't
wasn't
know if
written in any manual or anything like that. It just unwritten rules or side conversations that we know to be true.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So
when I first started sharing my story, I had a senior leader that criticized me and told me it made me look weak, and that if I wanted to get promoted to sergeant, I needed to keep my mouth shut. And I said, yes, sir. I knew he was wrong. But in the moment, I was going to get promoted, and I had already healed my brain a significant distance at that point. I mean, I was doing really good, and so I thought if I need to be quiet for a little bit to get in a position of authority so that I can change this culture, I'll be
mhm,
quiet for a little bit.
yeah, I get it. And man, hearing things like that of people still existing within our organizations is something I hear probably on a weekly basis. And as much as I try to change the culture, and when I get in front of executive level staff, like you have to have zero tolerance policy on that kind of stuff because, I'm sure he said it to other people, and those conversations can literally lock someone up for an entire career to where that will forever change them to where they will never feel comfortable coming forward. We got to stop that. And that's how it was at our place. But I hear that over and over again, even though people say, well, it looks like my department's trying to do more, but we still know in every corner of the building, there's still these individuals that run specialty units or run, different divisions that they have this, really ignorant philosophy at the end of the day. And it's affecting those people in the organization.
So this is when you're on patrol. You
Yep.
eventually do get back on SWAT as a team leader.
Yep.
How many more years is it before you realize, hey, something has to give?
So that was in 2016. I first went to go get some help while I was still on patrol in 2017. I wasn't honest with people that knew I was going in. I said, hey, it was because I went through a divorce. I had some child custody issues. But about 18 months after this original call, I went and had a very bad experience with a therapist that was an employee of the city of Mesa, and it just did not sit well with me. I ultimately went a few times. Finally disclosing, I would give a little piece of information as each time went on. And the last time when I described, this little girl's name was Ruby at the time. They've now changed it. Just again, nothing triggered in him to say, yeah, Travis, you need to do EMDR therapy. You need to be coming in weekly. It was just like, hey, when you start feeling distressed again, come back and see me. No plan of attack. And so, quite honestly, double give you the finger and I'm out, not doing this again. This is stupid. Um, I had met my now wife, and she was with ICAC, so Internet Crimes Against Children. And it was funny because they had been through that same person, and they said, nope, this guy's a joke. And they found their own person, which is Jennifer Cooper, ended up becoming my therapist, who now I do some events with. And my wife kept telling me, you got to go see Jen. You got to see Jen. She's different. And I kept making excuses. But yet this whole time things are they're just piling up. But I got back to the team and I thought, okay, I'm back to it with my brothers, this core group. I'm going to be good. And we were busy, man. And we had some pretty significant calls. all good work and all that, but just, the shit that you have to see day in and day out. And we were, again, just running and gunning, man. A lot of operations, not enough team members, not a lot of time off. And it was just hardcore. So you never really had a reset or time for recharge until, yeah, man, in 2021, I was is just, man, how all this stuff has worked is just super crazy. But 2021 on a Monday, March 8th of 2021, I was supposed to go see Jen. I had finally made an appointment. I'm literally pulling into her office and a barricade kicks out. And so it was another reason for me not to go. So I said, got a hold of her, said, I got to cancel. I'm out. I got a barricade. Went back. We handled the barricade. And then later that night, hostage rescue kicks out. And one of the caller was a little girl that had went to her neighbor in a nice area, and she had been shot and beaten badly by her father. And he was still inside this house with her older sister and mom. And we went there thinking we were going to do a rescue and get everybody else out, and went in and found everybody dead. And so that kicked my ass. And yeah.
Wow. There were some things there of your story that I really resonated with when I had my second of the really big anxiety attacks. Felt like a heart attack, chest pains going down the arm, couldn't breathe, thought I was going to pass out. I was on vacation, and the day I got back from vacation was SWAT training. And I remember thinking to myself, this is going to solve my problem. I love this, right? Like, this isn't the child crimes. This isn't the gang shootings and stabbings. I'm with my brothers. This is going to be good. And we're on the range for 5 minutes. Not 5 minutes. I'm sorry. We're on the range for a couple hours shooting, and our pagers go off. I'm dating myself a little bit. This is 2010.
I had them. Alpha pagers.
Pager goes off. Real world mission. It's a barricade. We get there. I'm just on outer containment. Still pretty young on the team. Only been on the team for a year and a half. And it took every ounce of my energy to stay focused on my job. I was so distracted in my head of these. What happens if I have an anxiety tech right here on this call? Oh my gosh. Like, I can't let my brothers down. Right. Like, and it was leaving that I realized I can't do that again. I got to fix this. I got to do something about this.
Yeah.
I can't, whether it's my patrol partners, whether it's my SWAT brothers, I got to have their back. So who was that first person? So for me, I had a person, meaning that was the first person that I looked in the eye and said, I need help. I can't do this anymore. Who did you have that person, that first person that you communicated something's really off?
Yeah, definitely my wife, Emily. She was aware, and she was being cool about it, but she definitely wanted me to get help. I'd had a couple pretty significant emotional breakdowns when we were on a vacation in 2020. And so she's like, you got to go talk about this. And then I did let my lieutenant at the time, Diana Clevenger, I had let her know that, like, hey, I'm struggling over the Ruby case, but I'm going to go get help. And I think I was kind of just trying to feel out what her reaction was going to be. I don't know that if there would have been, I had a good, super close relationship with her as professionally, and we were friends from working on the street. So I don't know if it would have been another SWAT lieutenant in there if I would have felt comfortable, but she knew about Ruby. So I think I was just feeling that out. Like, okay, what's Diana's reaction going to be to hear I'm still struggling with this case, 5 years later? And it was good. She's like, yeah, just get help. You're good. Just keep me updated what's going on and whatever you got to do to get yourself through that. So those were the two people. But and then ultimately, when I came forward, I had really a couple, core group of, not the whole team knew everything. They knew I was struggling, but my core group on the team, even, that I said, hey, just so you know, I'm dealing with some nasty shit right now that I got to work through. So.
And did they receive you?
They did, man. They were really good. And then that kind of snowballed from there till even when I went back and told the team, once I had made the decision I was going to seek retirement, just kick myself. We didn't have these conversations prior in my career, because within 24 hours, two people had come forward to me and said, man, can I have who your therapist is? I am struggling with the same types of things. Because I talked about triggers, I talked about my night terrors, and like, man, I thought I was the only one experiencing this. They told me, and I'm like, shit, I'm a sergeant team leader here. And a couple of them, both of them were my people on my squad. And here I'm the dumbass that hasn't had these conversations. But and now it's snowballed to where there's 6 or 7 guys on the team that are going to therapy through Jennifer on a regular basis just to keep squared away, and they've made some real progress. And so yeah, it's good.
Wow. Yeah, this is what it takes, though. That's the thing for us to have change. It's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
in my personal life. I don't learn from my successes. I don't learn typically from getting it all right. I learn from when I fall down, right? I learn from when I fail.
Yep.
I have to take an assessment and learn from it and move forward. And I feel like we as organizations, I mean, just the fact that we're even talking about this, the fact that you are telling your story around our country and that you are being received the way you are, that wasn't happening even 10 years ago, let alone,
Right.
you know, previous generations of cops. And so the fact that we're having these conversations and it's giving people the courage to step up. Hey, when you first connected with Jen, like that's a pretty nerve wracking thing for folks, especially if they've been to another counselor and this other counselor's failed them. And I say failed them. Maybe that's not even totally fair for some counselors. Let me say that differently. Just with any type of human relationship, you're going to connect with some people, you're not going to connect with some people. So you could have a
Yeah.
counselor that's trauma trained, that is culturally competent, but you may not connect with them. What was it like with Jen? Like, did you walk in and just lay it all down, or did you have to test the waters a little bit? And if so, then how did you know? Okay, I think she's trustworthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I mean, you heard me talk, and people that follow me on my socials and all that. I'm definitely a believer in having first responder therapists that they are willing to get into the dirtiness that we have to deal with, some of the stuff we deal with. But yeah, even with that, there could be someone in as a first responder therapist, you don't feel like connection. And then when I went in with Jen, I probably had a little bit of a head start because two of the detectives my wife worked with are these old salty guys that you'd never think they'd go into therapy. And she told me that, hey, Joe and Scott both are getting help here. They're making progress. They feel comfortable. So I think that did help me a little bit. And then of course my wife was going, so that helped. But I still had to feel her out, go in there and she gives me her background. She has law enforcement, family members. She was a probation officer. She's involved with Phoenix Fire. So there's all these connections that I think like, okay, she must know what we're all about here. And also, the organization that she contracts with is called Public Safety Crisis Solutions. That's all they do as first responders. So I think I felt a little bit of connection there. It wasn't through EAP. So, I unfortunately at times didn't trust that. So, yeah. And then once I felt that comfort, man, I vomited all over everything that I had. And that first session, that we call it the initial assessment, a lot of crying, a lot of just her sitting with me. Yeah, just trying to share your story.
That was my first session as well. I had
Yeah.
a previous one with the counselor I went to, but I tested the waters. I mean, I already trusted her, I already knew her, but like
Mhm.
I was still like, if I actually say the things,
Yeah.
they're take my badge and gun. I am done. And how am I going to support my family? Right.
And that's what I thought too. Yeah.
And then what I loved is when I got done doing that verbal vomit on her and just like said it all, and I just wept. And then I looked at her and I'm like, all right, so I'm crazy. And she's like, Christian, you're not crazy. Do you want to know how many cops and firefighters have sat on that couch and told me almost exactly what you just told me? This is a human response to the not normal volume of trauma that you experience, either primary or secondary in this profession.
Yeah, man. And I think that you just made a great point. Like, it doesn't matter what your calls were. Was it cumulative? Was it a couple big ones? Was it a shooting? The responses that we're all having to this trauma that we're having to experience is everyone. I get so many people, whether they reach out to me or they come up to me when I'm at these events, they're like, man, triggers. Yep. I had it, really bad with like the duct tape from Ruby. Yep. Their trigger may be going by a location, maybe a certain kind of vehicle, whatever it is, something on the radio. All of that, it's the same, man. So that's where, yeah, what you said, it is a normal human response to the chaos that we're expected to deal with in the course of our careers. So that's then we're using the word normal. We should expect that. We should expect that if you have become a first responder, you are going to have some difficult days you are going to need to seek assistance with.
Yeah. And for new folks, at least when I joined the profession in 2005, I mean, I heard this stuff and I believed it, but I was like,
Yep.
not me. Right. I mean,
Yeah.
like, it wasn't that I thought I was Superman, but I was just like, hey, I have friends outside of law enforcement. I'm physically fit. I have a faith background that keeps me grounded. I had these things going for me, but it's kind of like going into, I've run throughout my life, did, different types of running, whether it's triathlons or I ran in college my freshman year. Sports injuries just come with running. Like it never surprised me. It kind of pissed me sometimes. Like, dang, man, I just jacked up my ankle. It's going to take me a week or two to totally get back from this. But it was anticipated. And so when it happened, it was just like, all right, let's run the system, right? I need to ice this. I need to elevate this. I need to, do these things to heal it. But we didn't have that anticipation going into this job.
That is so true. Yeah, I mean, the injuries are expected physically, or problems with our backs, wearing a gun belt all the time, or yeah, you're on the team and you can't do that forever because it's really hard on your body. But when you talk about the mental stuff, there's still that like, really? And I think it's because it's so, you don't necessarily see it. So yeah, your ankle swells up, your knees are, you have that intense pain that you can equate like, yep, my knee, something's wrong with my knee. But when we don't know why we're feeling this way from these, yeah, I just went to a child death call. Why am I not sleeping? What is going on here? Because we don't have the conversations, then you're searching for trying to figure things out. So that's where the conversation and what you said in the academy and stuff, man, that's what I just found out. Montana State Academy is going to start having me in starting this fall. I get 2.5 hours with the recruits. And that's what I would like to see all over the country, like having these conversations with the brand new people, not to scare them or anything, but like, hey, just be honest. Like it's going to be rough some days. And this is why you need to keep your, your brain trained up, and we'll show you what you can do to relieve some of that, the experiences that you're having to deal with.
Yeah. So you landed on Jen's couch or whatever type of chair she had in her office. I mean, you verbally just unloaded on her. What were the steps forward after that? What were some of those treatment modalities that she brought to the table that helped heal your brain?
Yeah, the first thing I need to do, which I was totally against, I can't believe I did it, but I'm still thankful I did, is I went on some medication, some PTSD medication. Yeah. And yeah, you've heard me speak that, I know in our profession, like those are like the demons, and, and I think some of that comes from the calls we go on, and all these people are on all these different medications and they're still not, functioning well. Right. So I think we associate a lot of that. But I said, yep, at that point I was all in. Like anything I do, whether, if it, whatever kind of work it is, if I say I'm going to do it. So I said, okay, let's do this. I went on the medication. It was great because I guess probably the biggest thing for me was it got me sleep, because I was not having good sleep and I needed rest. If you don't understand how much sleep plays into our repair and recovery, then you've got to educate yourself. And then also I had like, which Jen calls rescue medicine. So before I would go into a session with her, I would take it. And then immediately afterwards, because those sessions were extremely hard. And so with Jen, the two big things she worked with me was cognitive behavioral therapy. So it just learned, it teaches me tools and resources to deal with the trauma that I experienced, because you're never going to forget it, but you need to learn how to, take the duct tape, for instance. Before I went to therapy, if I saw duct tape, whatever, it would put me on my ass. Emotion I would feel. I've learned how to work through that. And some of it seems very simple, but we need to train our brain to be prepared for those cases and think maybe ahead, like, hey, I'm going to do this. I could encounter this interaction. I'm ready to handle it, right? No different than we do with tactics, or we're going to a call for service. We're thinking about, okay, I see this coming. How can I handle it? And then also EMDR therapy literally saved my life. And if you haven't, your listeners haven't heard of that, please research it, because I have yet to encounter a first responder that has now, whether they've heard through me or other people have done EMDR and not said, holy crap, this is life changing. It just takes, it teaches your brain where that should be stored versus being up here and running through it all the time. And man, it was so worth it. Yeah. Will be a big part of my life, probably the rest of my life.
I know I shared this with you already before we hit record, but yeah, I just started some EMDR work. Hadn't done that before, and I'm blown away. I'm wore out.
Oh,
1 hour session, and I need to go to bed. Like it's.
yep. And I will never, yeah, because Jen, she was so good about preparing me for that, right? But she said, listen, let's come up with a plan. What do you have to do tonight? Because she wouldn't. So for instance, if we had a therapy session planned, and for instance, oh, my kid's going to have, his 8-year-old birthday party that night, she'd be like, okay, we're rescheduling or we're not doing EMDR, because she knew that you had to have that time to repair and process, because even after the session, your brain is still cycling through some of the things you work through and trying to let it settle appropriately. And so, yeah, I had my routine, man. Afterwards, I'd go home, go to the backyard, lived in beautiful Arizona, had a pool, and I'd sit there, listen to music and throw the ball with my dog. Just super, not a whole lot of interaction with anything, and just chilled out. And I had to educate, and Jen does a good thing about this, educating your family what that looks like, so they don't think you're coming back in zombie land of like, well, why are they just withdrawn and quiet? Well, man, it is a physical, mental, just this, I describe it as a fight, really, to be honest with you. Like, that's what you feel like, but it's so worth it.
I love some of the things that you've brought up, because I know for listeners who are considering, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to reach out. I'm going to find a culturally competent counselor. I'm going to give them a shot. I'm going to test the waters. And
Yeah.
you've really highlighted some of the things I think that they can look for. One, what's their background? They don't have to be a cop. They don't even have to have a cop background, but are they trained in being a trauma therapist? What modalities are they going to use? EMDR is, I mean, it's center stage right now. Tons of
Right.
responder therapists are using EMDR. And then what I love even more is the fact that Jen isn't just throwing these treatments at you to see if they'll stick, but she's clearly competent in understanding the process, to where she's also preparing you for the aftermath of the treatment. I don't know if aftermath is the right word, but kind of that
Yep.
follow-up care, right? How do I help my body work this stuff out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's so important. And that's, yeah, yeah, you're making a great point. These are the types of conversations people need to listen to. It's like, okay, what do I look for, in these therapists? And if they're not doing these types of things, and I'll tell you, so I work with Jen, and then I have 2 in the state of Montana that are my trusted first responder therapists professionally. They work with me for the first responders here. Those people all think the same. So there's training and education out there for them to understand how to address the issues that we are experiencing. And so if you're going to a new one, they should know that as well. It's out there. They know how to process it, and it's good. And there's a lot more organizations that are, I guess, coining the phrase trusted first responder therapists, because I do think that we are a unique breed. We're not, you know, we have trust issues. We have some of the stuff we deal with day in and day out. That's a lot for the therapist to handle too. So they've got to be resilient and strong and ready to take that on.
Yeah. I love what you also said about this is going to be a piece of the rest of your life. Here's the deal. I'm a runner. I'm
Yeah.
not getting younger, right?
Right.
So what do I have to do as a 44-year-old man if I want to continue to have this as a hobby? Well, man, stretching has become more important than it ever was before. Either
Mm-hmm.
taking an ice bath, uh, primarily ice baths. Ice showers have their purpose, but an ice bath is different for me, because that's actually helping my legs recover, my lower
Right.
back recover. I've had to accept that in my 40s, I can't run and act like I did in my 20s, where I could run and not stretch afterwards and I was fine. Right. Like,
Right.
and I love the fact that you're approaching this. That isn't a failure. That isn't you mean I can't just be healed in like a month? Right. I mean, like, it took how many years to get you where you're at, how much trauma that you observed and experienced, either through your eyes or the eyes of others. And I love that mindset.
Hmm. Yeah, it's super important. And also, for the retirees out there, you're about ready to retire. I've had some things pop up with me when I have this break in July. I'm going to deal with, some calls that I thought were settled. And because my mind has been able to slow down, and Jen describes it like this: as you start emptying that cup a little bit and dealing with some of the other calls, your brain is like, oh, okay, I see you've dealt with that one. Well, here's this other one that's not taken care of appropriately. And they kind of pop up. And plus, it's part of our lives do slow down a little bit. Even though I'm busy with what I'm doing right now, it's not the 40 plus hours a week of being a first responder where you're just on the point all the time. So yeah, and for me, I've got some things that I'm going to deal with, and I know that throughout my life, if any issue like this pops up, I know where I'm going. EMDR therapy, like that, number one. So yeah.
I had someone ask me yesterday whether I would be willing to go back on medication. I said, absolutely. I said,
Hmm.
it's in my toolbox now. I don't currently need it, but
Right.
it's on the table. And I mean, in my mind, everything's on the table that it's trusted therapy that has research behind it.
Agree.
And I like having those things there, just like I would when I sit there and think about the tools in my garage. I'm not near as handy as my grandpa. My grandpa could build a freaking house and
Yep.
plumb electrical that I can't do. Build a cat house, maybe. Anyhow, I have a lot of tools
Yeah.
and they're there and I don't get rid of them because I use them once every 2 years. And when you need it, you need it and you go grab it and you use it and then you put it back. You don't have to buy it or borrow it or whatever else. So that's really the way I look at this whole mental health thing.
No, agreed. And that's the I guess the core of cognitive behavioral therapy as well. Jen provided me the tools and resources. I know that I'm going to have some difficult days still. I'm going to have something that pops in my head, but I know how to deal with it. Me going around and talking about Ruby all the time, I'm constantly having to use those tools and resources to make sure I'm squared away. So,
Yeah, I notice it as I tell my story in group settings that it comes at a consequence. Like I'm gonna, much like the sessions, I'm gonna be feeling that a little bit, and I need to be intentional about my relationships here at home so it doesn't
sure.
pour out into them. Let's talk about Arena, your business, My Arena. What's that all about?
Yeah, man. So that's what started. Like I said, it was just by chance. I got asked when I moved to Montana by the undersheriff in Flathead County to come speak to some tactical leadership here in Montana and share my story of what I'd went through. And it just snowballed from there and kind of blew up first in Montana. I get asked to be on a pretty big podcast, Cleared Hot podcast with Andy Stump, and he's based out of Kalispell, and that took off, made contacts with people all over the world, literally. And so from that point, I'm like, well, man, I feel like people want to hear this. So I created an LLC called My Arena. And that's based on of one of the meditation sessions that Jen had with me early on, based on the speech "Citizens in the Republic" by Theodore Roosevelt. It gets coined "Man in the Arena" speech now, but that was all that failure. She was addressing that to say, "Hey, you've been in the arena, you've done this." So I thought it was perfect name. And yeah, now I do, my seminar. I go around with trusted therapists. I share my story. They give their clinical side of it, which I think is a huge piece, and it's really been connecting with people. And then recently, I guess probably in the last 4 months, we've got into consulting as well, to where there's a lot of agencies, unfortunately, out there that really have no good wellness program. And so we're coming in and addressing some of those issues, do an agency assessment for them, and then give them, best practices and recommendations. And, I do that with Jen. She gives her side of it, of what the clinical side should look at. And then from an organizational standpoint of what we can be doing for our first responders when they encounter those major critical incidents, and how we should be addressing those, instead of just like letting it go and fly by the seat of our pants, because we know in our profession when we do that, things get missed and they usually don't turn out the best. And yeah, so that's what I'm doing now, man. Yeah.
I
And
appreciate
I
that.
have something on social media, the My Arena, and I know you're going to give some of that stuff out. You can put that at the end, but and then a website and all that. So
Yeah, we'll drop all those down in the
uh,
show notes. Brother, I appreciate this work you're doing. The more voices that are out there having the courage to share a story. You don't have to do this. You could be retired in God's country, Montana,
Yeah.
living your best life, doing some therapy, taking care of your brain, and not having to relive your Ruby story over and over again. But you are benefiting people. You are making this more acceptable for us to talk about.
Yeah. Well, honestly, man, it's my pleasure that I get the opportunity to do this. I mean, I think all of us as first responders, obviously, we have something in us that wants to help other people. And, if I've got a few more years of being able to help our community just get stronger and hopefully get this next generation, that this just becomes standard practice and standard conversation, then we walk away from it and say, okay, at least we've left this legacy. I guess that's, yeah, like I said, it's my honor.
We left it better than we found it, right?
Absolutely.
Well, Travis, time is my greatest commodity. I can't make more of this stuff. Thank you for giving me so much of yours, brother.
Right on. I appreciate you having me, man. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
You as well.
Oh my gosh, ladies and gentlemen. What did you think of that conversation with Travis? Again, having folks that have experienced some form of post-traumatic stress and it getting to that real distressing point where they were really at this almost life and death thing where they had to raise their hand, they needed to get help. Having them have the courage to share their story, I think is powerful because I see it giving other people courage to raise their hand and get help as well. And that's what I want to see. I want to see people healing their brains and getting back to where they enjoy life. I want you to enjoy life, folks. Hey, Jaimie and I want to hear from you how we're doing here on the podcast. There's a few different ways for you to communicate back to us. First and foremost, please follow us on whatever podcast platform you're consuming this on. That will cause the next episode to come up. We'd also really appreciate it if you either gave us like thumbs up on YouTube, or if this is on Apple or Spotify, you can rate and review us. There's 5 stars waiting on our main page. We'd really appreciate a 5-star rating if we've earned it. If we haven't earned it, instead shoot me an email at chris@gravityct.com. Let us know how to make a better future, Marriage Monday topics, or guests for me to interview. Folks, we only get to live this life once. Let's go out and take care of the people in our tribe. Take care of each other. God bless.